Hello world of YouTube and welcome to another episode of Redacted, the show where I take a look at records that have a solid foundation but a spotty execution and making a smoother listening experience out of it all. And this month we're going to be taking a look at a band that I've never really talked about all that much on the channel. I reviewed their last album on the listening log when it came out, but that's, I think, it. It's the Arctic Monkeys. I like the Arctic Monkeys. I think they have a very solid discography. They got some highs, they got some lows, they got some underrated projects, they've got some mids, and this month I'm going to be taking a look, doing my first full excursion into the band by looking at a record of theirs that I do think had mad potential, and while the presented product wasn't bad, I don't necessarily like it quite as much as other people do. But it's an album that holds a lot of personal significance for me because one of the song titles on it inspired the title of a podcast I was on for a couple of years. And I'm kind of using that to sort of pivot also into like, hey, I'm going to address that in the form of a redacted of the Arctic Monkeys' fifth album, the 2013 tongue-in-cheek self-titled record, AM.
The horizon tries, but it's just not as kind on the eye.
Now, I have friends who have a heavy interest in this record as well, and let me get this out of the way. Just because I don't like it as much as people who are more passionate about it, I don't think this album is bad. And this album's actually really solid. I just feel like the sequencing of the record and some of the A-sides do not measure up to the B-sides from this era. The B-sides from this era are fan-fucking-tastic, and I injected a decent amount of them into the album itself. I also just kind of really wanted to play with the sort of back and forth nature that a lot of the lyrics allude to, because I like the era of this band. I feel like a lot of the songs on here that work so incredibly well. You know, they juxtapose these feelings of passion and pain, love, lust, and the conflicts wrap up within them so fantastically well. The experimentations with some sleeker grooves really fit the band incredibly well, and I feel like some of the singles from this stand as some of their best songs to date. And I do think that it is an album worth celebrating. You know, similarly to like Block Party's 4, I feel like the band are channeling a good pocket. The sequencing just needed a little bit more work. And so today, I'm going to be doing that. My version of AM is the same number of tracks. It's 12 tracks, but it's a minute shorter. So let's see if that minute trimming was worth it by taking a look at my track listing right now.
Stop the world, 'cause I wanna get television. Just my text into your mind and soul. Get your uses to feel with electricity. You're so dark, baby. Why'd you only call me when you're high? High. When you're losing and your fuse is fireside. Mad sounds in your ears. They make you wanna hear me say, is are you mine?
Now, my biggest hurdle, I think, with this Redacted was actually right at the very beginning. Because while I don't hate Do I Want to Know, it isn't my favorite song on the album. But I feel like it's a good opener, because it talks about the themes of the album pretty well, and a good sort of summation of paranoia within a relationship, you know, the questioning of your partner. But I want to use it in a different facet at the end of the album. So instead, to start the record, I picked one of those great B-sides. It also starts with the count-in. It's not with the bass drum, but it gets right into the groove, similarly to Do I Want to Know. It's Stop the World, I Want to Get Off With You. It's a song that also talks about love and lust, but in a less paranoid sense, and I kind of want that paranoia to be a resonant part of the end of the album. And instead of setting you in that paranoia in the beginning, I'd rather start you off with a passionate foot. Stopping the entire world to get off with somebody else. And it's a great introduction to what I feel like is the narrator's perspective on a handful of tracks on this album. So it acts as a good thematic starting point, before introducing the other half of this relationship, Arabella, with an electrifying groove. It's very War Pigs-ish, and it's a great song. It's got a great chorus, it's got a really good riff, it's got a great fucking solo, and I feel like it's a good ramp up in energy without losing the groove of Stop the World Because I Want to Get Off With You. I think that it's a good follow-up to that while adding a little more zest, because after that, you get into the real passion of it with Electricity, another incredible B-side that has an electric groove at its core, and it ramps up the energy even more. It feels like just a raw, passionate moment, feeling the electricity. And I wanted to use that as a sort of just throttling point. From the energy of Electricity, we get cast off into two sleeker, groove-driven tracks in the form of You're So Dark and Why'd You Only Call Me When You're High. Two songs that both have the highs and lows when discussing somebody that you're at least involved with. You're So Dark does more of what Arabella does as far as shaping this person from the mind's eye of the narrator in a positive light. Talking about their darker tendencies or their darker interests. Talking about their loves of H.P. Lovecraft and Edgar Allan Poe. Before almost flipping that on its head of a little more of a story-driven track with Why'd You Only Call Me When You're High. It's a great juxtaposition to sort of a fantasizing into reality. The narrator's mindset of You're So Dark being about the person in question before the reality of their interactions together, trying to strive for one of them late-night hookup scenarios. You know what I mean? And I wanted to kind of create another one of those sort of juxtaposition moments with the follow-up song Fireside, showcasing the act of moving on from somebody, while also adding a little bit of energy to the overall kineticism of the project as it's going forth. I think that Fireside doesn't necessarily narratively fit following Why'd You Only Call Me When You're High, but I felt like it tied into, again, the sort of back and forth dynamic that this album lyrically throws around in concepts, acting as another swift lyrical turn into a different section. Before going into the song that it actually comes after on the album proper, Mad Sounds, I kind of have this backwards effect from You're So Dark into playing the next three songs in backwards order. But Mad Sounds acts as a good sort of slow burn, sort of wash away from any sort of groove or kineticism that the album had been thriving in from Electricity. Sort of an acceptance from the messaging scene on the last song in an adverse sort of way. Sort of an acceptance of somebody leaving you, while also soothing the listener through the heartbreak. It's a great song, and it's a great slower moment from this record. And of course, it's the namesake for the podcast that I was on. So it feels like it kind of needs to be here, you know what I mean? Plus, if you really wanted to get meta about the narrative of this project, you could see Fireside and Mad Sounds as the internal dialogue from the narrator protagonist amidst getting rejected from the booty call in Why'd You Only Call Me When You're High. And from the calmness of Mad Sounds, I wanted to give us one more burst of vibrancy in the 1-2 punch of Are You Mine and Knee Socks. Two more songs that further cement the back and forth nature of the mentality of the writing on this project. Are You Mine's contemplative side with Knee Socks' outright sensuality behind it. Just feels like a good pairing together before casting off into the horizon with the smooth songs of I Wanna Be Yours and One for the Road. Another core theme that sort of crops up in the actual finale of the album. I wanted to have it be a further cementation of the philosophy behind this point in the record. Before going into One for the Road, a great penultimate song that just sees the groove still sort of settling in. I know Knee Socks was the penultimate track on the original record, and I wanted to kind of recreate the feeling that that song evokes, because it is a good penultimate song. And I think One for the Road has another good similar vibe. It's just in a different pocket all its own. But I think it also sort of embodies that sort of closing time, end of the night feeling that Nisox does evoke before giving the people what they want, giving the people what they need. Do I Want to Know? The song that, after coming off of the heels of tracks like Are You Mine and I Want to Be Yours, enveloping the listener in that paranoia and leaving the listener with this sort of headspace of being in love, having this sort of kinship, but also being paranoid about it. And it feels like, yes, that has been the core message throughout this entire album experience, but throughout the entire album, it's been sort of from the perspective of being deep in it, being deep-seated in that, whereas Do I Want to Know feels like it's from a completely separated point in time altogether, and I wanted to use it as a closer because I feel like it's a good point for some of those themes to be spun into a different realm. Plus, it's got that gargantuan riff that everyone loves to meme on that acts as a good show-stopping closer, and that's why I kind of made it the finale of this record. And that is my Redacted on AM. What did you think about it? Did you like it? Did you not? Let me know your feelings on this album and my Redacted in the comments down below. Now, as far as going over the songs that I removed and why, I Want It All off because I swapped it basically for Electricity. They're both points where the album kind of picks up in energy, and I just think Electricity's ramp up in kineticism just suits the pocket of the record that I put it in a little better. Number one, Party Anthem is a solid enough track, but I feel like if I wanted to focus even more on some of the thematics in the writing, it had to go, and I was in place for one of the other B-sides. And the same thing could have been said for Snap Out of It. Snap Out of It actually does a good job at almost playing a counterpoint to a lot of the themes that I double down on the record of this back and forth mentality, but I ultimately took it out because I like the B-sides of this project more, and I felt like for the sake of pacing, it also had to go. If you'd like to listen to it, a link for the Spotify and YouTube versions are linked in the description. Thank you again so very much for watching. If you liked it, be sure to give it a like. If you want to see more of my music, gaming, and general notary content, be sure to subscribe. Special thanks to my patrons. If you want to join the ranks to get early access to content, exclusive content, or to help drive the community, it's linked in the description. I'm going to get out of here, though. Thank you again so very much for watching. I've been Vowel Rack. You guys will get his lives and situations, and I'll see you another day.
Thank you.